We went through this from the Obama-Biden administration to the Trump administration to the Biden-Harris administration. So we've become a little bit experienced at this. So I don't see this as being anything more than business as usual in transitions of government. They need to get their legs in. I am, however, really optimistic about what the future of our industry is going to be, particularly with the Trump administration.
That's Geoff Whaling, chair of the National Hemp Association. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock. Thank you for joining me on today's show. So we're talking to Geoff today about all kinds of things. We're going to start talking about that $19 million grant that NHA received last fall from the Biden administration and what the status of that grant is now under the Trump administration, which has frozen, Climate-Smart grant money. Geoff says he's very optimistic about working with the Trump administration. So we're going to hear about the source of his optimism. He's going to talk about some strategies for the hemp industry moving forward and working with the new administration. All that and more. But first, a few words from our sponsors, and then we'll be back with a couple of nuggets of hemp news. This episode is brought to you in part by I&D Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana, where they believe in the goodness of hemp. I&D Hemp is a family-owned, mission-driven, and environmentally focused industrial hemp food, feed, and fiber company, providing new opportunities for farmers and rural communities. Their mission is to provide innovative agricultural products and services to connect American farmers with the pioneers and businesses that see hemp as a way to bring real and lasting change to our communities and planet. Learn more at indhemp.com.
The KP4 Hemp Cutter, introducing a revolution in hemp harvesting, setting a new standard for harvesting quality, speed, and efficiency. The KP4 prepares hemp for ideal retting and easy on-field tedding, raking, and baling. Easy to maintain and designed to withstand the punishments of hemp harvesting. The KP4 Hemp Cutter. Available only at hempcutter.com.
Okay, welcome back. So here we are. Got a couple of news nuggets here for you this week. All right, this first story comes to us from South Dakota Public Broadcasting. It was written by C.J. Keene, and the headline reads, Ukrainian hemp growers visit South Dakota to learn and share ag experiences. The story says that a group of hemp farmers from Ukraine visited South Dakota last month, late January, to learn from local growers and share their own experiences in the industry. Led by Ola Zapletniuk, the delegation represents nearly 200,000-acre farming operation in Ukraine, where hemp is being used to remediate war-damaged soils. Hosted by the South Dakota Industrial Hemp Association, the group met with farmers like Al Meyer, who grew 500 acres of hemp last season. Discussions focused on cultivation techniques, climate advantages, and industry challenges, particularly limited processing capacity in both countries. Hemp is seen as a promising crop in Ukraine, both for its ability to capture carbon and restore contaminated land. South Dakota, despite entering the hemp industry late, is emerging as a strong producer due to its ideal climate and rainfall patterns. The tour continues through early February with additional visits to U.S. hemp operations. So that's cool. I would like to talk to these Ukrainians, so if you happen to be listening, drop me a line. This next story I read on Hemp Today. The headline reads, European Natural Fibers Alliance merges platforms to create Linen and Hemp Dream Lab. And then here's a quick summary. So the Alliance for European Flax, Linen, and Hemp has launched the Linen and Hemp Dream Lab, an online platform for textile research and sourcing in fashion, home, and technical textiles. Merging two previous resources, the platform showcases 1,000+ flax and hemp textile innovations with detailed product sheets and filtering options for buyers and designers. A physical showroom in Paris complements the digital hub, allowing hands-on exploration of materials. By connecting creatives with European fiber producers, the Dream Lab aims to expand sustainable textile use and drive industry innovation. Yeah, I want to talk to these people. I will have a link to the Linen and Hemp Dream Lab on the show page for this episode. And finally, here's a story about some folks up there in Canada, Hemp Alta. that's sort of a press release, but it says Hemp Alta shifts focus to hemp-based carbon credit market. Calgary-based Hemp Alta is shifting its focus to nature-based carbon credit solutions, leveraging industrial hemp's scalability and global impact. CEO Darren Bonder highlighted that the move aligns with the company's long-term strategy to maximize investor returns while contributing to carbon sequestration efforts. Hemp Alta is already operating in 11 countries, using satellite imaging and flux towers to monitor farms and accurately measure carbon capture. Bonder emphasized that industrial hemp outperforms trees in carbon absorption, with an acre sequestering 4 to 5 tons of CO2. As the voluntary carbon credit market expands, Hemp Alta aims to position itself as a leading player in this space. While regulatory challenges remain, growing global acceptance of industrial hemp is making adoption easier. So yeah, I think I would like to talk to the folks at Hemp Alta about this too. So I'm a bit of a simpleton and a dreamer, but I think here's a clear example of how the news will sort of impact the show. So hopefully we'll get to talk to somebody from Hemp Alta too soon. I was on a panel with Brittany McKell from Hemp Alta last year at the NOCO conference in Colorado. But yeah, I think I need to learn more about what they're doing with carbon sequestration and carbon credits. Fascinating stuff. So, all right, there you go. 3 interesting stories from the world of industrial hemp. I will have links to those stories on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com. That's it. That's all I got right now, except this exciting interview with Geoff Whaling. Yeah, Geoff has been posting some interesting perspectives on LinkedIn about hemp and the new administration. So I wanted to reach out and, get his take on things. So that's what this is today. Hope you enjoy it. Here we go. Geoff Whaling, chair of the National Hemp Association. Welcome back to the podcast. How are you doing?
Oh, it's very good to be with you again. Is this our 4th time, 5th time?
Oh, I've lost count. You were the very first interview I conducted for this podcast like six and a half years ago. So yeah, who's counting at this point? I always enjoy talking to you. You've got a great perspective on things. And well, can you give people sort of a very brief introduction as to who you are? What you do?
Yeah, Geoff Whaling. I chair the National Hemp Association. I've been in this role for now coming on 6.5, 7 years. Certainly was one of the original advocates for hemp prior to the 2014 Farm Bill. Joined up with a number of people from Pennsylvania, got that legislation passed, and quickly started the Pennsylvania Hemp Industry Council, which I chaired until recently, and certainly focused on not only what we're doing across the country federally in a number of states, but now around the world. And certainly we're happy. We've created standing committees of hemp organizations nationally. We have social equity standing committees, and about 2 years ago we started the standing committee of international hemp organizations, and now have I think about 24 groups from around the world that are involved in it. So I hope that I am still able to continue to learn from everyone, meet the challenges. We've got a new board at NHA over the last 12 months. We've been really focusing on what's important to our industry and how to respond.
Cool. Awesome. Well, as you describe what you do, it's clear to me that you are a builder of community, and that is exactly what we need in this world. So excellent. Last fall, I interviewed Erica Stark and Steve Groff on the show. Erica works at the NHA. I guess she's the executive director. And the reason for that conversation was a grant from the USDA for, like climate-smart practices involving industrial hemp to clean the Chesapeake Bay. That was like a $19.8 million grant that NHA was sort of in charge of. obviously we've had a change in administration, and there's been a whole new focus on government efficiency and money, and there was a grant freeze announced. I think maybe a federal judge lifted that for now, but I wonder if you can just kind of tell us the status of that grant.
Yeah, so the bottom line is we don't know. Erica, who you rightly called our executive director, I like to say she's the brains of our operation, has her pulse on what's happening in the industry.
I was going to say that, but I thought that might be rude to put you in that position.
I'm quite proud of the work that we've done together and her leadership in this space. She was really hands-on. This was a USDA RCCP grant, conservation grant. The funding, however, from it came out of the Biden-Harris IRA. Obviously, with the Trump administration coming into play, there's uncertainty around whether or not that funding would continue. Erica was working feverishly with USDA officials and the USDA reps in Harrisburg and trying to get the contract for this done. For those who are not aware of the process, you spend months really kind of preparing an application and submitting it by the deadline. There's a review process, an elimination process, and then an award process. So it takes a good amount of time. And although in all cases they make an announcement of who has been awarded grants, it is not until such time as those are contracted that they're really legally binding.
Okay.
We did not have our contract completely legally papered. And Erica was working through December to get that done. We have not heard what the status of that is. And certainly while I was in DC recently, I was asking what people knew. And quite frankly, a lot of the people that I was speaking with, just didn't know yet. And I think it is more because this funding came from the Inflation Reduction Act, that it would be in jeopardy. Again, I don't know for sure, and we're just waiting. Obviously, the grant was focused on advancing regenerative agricultural practices. We were awarded it, we believe, in part because we also added in a industrial hemp fiber component to it. But it really was to help advance regenerative agricultural practices with farmers. And the goal was over the next 5 years to plant upwards of 5,000 acres along tributaries leading into the Chesapeake Bay watershed and reporting on the findings from that. But it was an educational program for farmers. We have a great promise that it will provide farmers with just one more level of working with industrial hemp, something we need. I hope that at the end of the day, if this funding is not available or it's canceled, that we can seek a waiver.
Right. Oh, okay. It's good that you've got some kind of strategy around that. But you guys aren't the only ones in the space that were awarded grants recently. And so I imagine a lot of the people that I know in the hemp space are in the same boat, right?
Well, I think that it's right that certainly some of our members and our colleagues have applied, have been awarded, and I don't know exactly what stage they were in, what steps they've taken to secure those. But that is just, what I've experienced in going through transitions of government. We went through this from the, Obama-Biden administration to the Trump administration to the Biden-Harris administration. So we've become a little bit experienced at this. So I don't see this as being, anything more than business as usual in transitions of government. They need to get their legs in. I am, however, really optimistic about what the future of our industry is going to be, particularly with the Trump administration.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that, because I think there's a lot of people who just feel there's chaos right now, and then there's a lot of people who are very joyous about what's happening. I feel like, this Department of Government efficiency is right in line with the whole like starve the beast kind of thing that the Republicans have been talking about for generations now, right? So it's interesting. Like, as a spectator sport, it is fascinating. We are living through a really historic time, but I love that you're optimistic about this. And I'm curious if you can offer, like some strategies for the hemp industry in general as they sort of like move into this uncharted territory with the Trump administration.
Yeah, I think that people forget that industrial hemp was legalized under the 2018 Farm Bill, which was really where we improved the language around our industry, around this plant, which is now an official commodity. It removed hemp from the Controlled Substances Act, which was really the biggest barrier that prevented universities and others from taking advantage of the 2014 Farm Bill. That legislation was called the Legitimacy of Industrial Hemp Research, and no one would take on the research because it was still part of the Controlled Substances Act. So 2018 was really our starting block. And that was done under the Trump administration. And certainly some of the players that were with President Trump during his first administration are back again. But they now are going into roles where they were involved in policy in the White House, but now they're going to be inside USDA, which is why I have a little more hope and am quite optimistic. And the reason I said that, Eric, is we won't have to go around educating people about what hemp is and what hemp isn't. They know already. Certainly incoming USDA Secretary Rawlins, she was in the domestic policy side of the White House. And although, we didn't have sit down, knock them out discussions about the Industrial Hemp Farming Act, which was the legislation put into the 2018 Farm Bill, that was her responsibility. There were discussions that talked about it, and certainly they know that this was something signed into law under the Trump administration. The other thing that gives me promise is that the nominee for Undersecretary Stephen Vaden. Stephen Vaden was a champion for our industry. Formerly under the Trump administration, he was the chief counsel to USDA. And as Erica will attest, when we were asked to come and speak to the 2019 USDA Global Employees Conference, I spoke from a podium inside USDA. Stephen Vaden approached me at the time and said, what three things do you need from us? And that resulted in, for the first time ever, USDA issuing a legal opinion on the 2018 Farm Bill, specifically as it related to hemp. And that document is available online. But certainly, that legal opinion coming out of his office kind of put a period. Hemp is legal. And it also was a learning curve for not only us, but for him, because our biggest challenge at that time was banking. It still remains a big issue.
Still a challenge, yeah.
But he believed that the legal opinion would send a clear message that industrial hemp was legalized, or hemp was legalized under the 2018 Farm Bill, period. And there should be no questions. What happened is, I was working at the time with the chairman of Bank of America and his group. They were one of the biggest roadblocks that we knew of for our industry. And the response from them is, this is great, Geoff. We appreciate that USDA has given us this legal opinion, but we don't listen to them. We take our directions from Treasury. So that was the beginning of us really realizing that we needed a whole of government approach or an all of government approach to this. And that resulted in Stephen and us working with Treasury to get their guidance that came out of FinCEN that issued guidance to the banking industry. That hasn't resolved all the issues. I now have a greater appreciation and respect for why banks are still challenged by this. But certainly we began a process that we still are moving forward on today, which is this all of government approach.
Yeah, that was actually my next question. So you've talked about the whole of government approach almost every time I've talked to you on the show, and I wonder now with the change in climate change in Washington, the administration change. Do you feel more positive about getting that whole government approach?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we all will need to do is recognize that there are new sheriffs in town, and that the rules are a little bit different, and we need to really adapt our practices and approach to them. And in the case, we're now going from asking for a whole of government approach, which was the terminology used by the Biden-Harris administration, to now using all of government, because that is something that the Trump administration is using consistently in discussing, how they can get all agencies of government to work together.
Okay.
So, in our, actually, and I have it here, this is what I took to Washington, but in it, we took that 2025 policy recommendations and repeatedly asked for an all of government approach. And it's there are dozens and dozens of examples of agencies that just don't know the difference. The most current one that I've shared is when I was in Africa last year and was attending and speaking at the Africa Food Security Conference in Kigali, Rwanda. The other thing that we were undertaking at the time is having discussions with the Rwanda government, specifically their board of development. And the chairman of that organization, when we presented what we have broken down into 8 categories of opportunities that the industrial hemp industry can provide from America to Africa, they wanted to focus on nutrition, grain, seed, protein, as most African nations. Within about 45 minutes, they put me together with the CEO of a company called Africa Improved Foods, which they own 7% of, and met with them, presented them with the nutritional profile that we had with us
of hemp grain. Right.
Well, right, and it came broken down from Victory Hemp in hemp hearts, in hemp protein, their V70, V80 protein, and the CEO of Africa Improved Foods was astounded in what he was looking at. And their biggest challenge right now is that they process about 650 tons of grain a month, and they are one of the biggest suppliers of nutritional food to the World Food Program. And I'm just thinking, well, this is perfect. Cindy McCain was at the World Food Program. Her husband helped us advance, including tribal councils on territories in the 2018 Farm Bill. Cindy was aware of this. She and I had met a couple times on hemp. So I'm thinking this is terrific. This is an opportunity for our industry. The next day, the CEO came to me and said, yeah, we have a little bit of a problem, Geoff. Neither USAID or the World Food Program recognizes hemp as a food ingredient. And I said, well, perfect, because guess what? USAID and the World Food Program are here at this conference. I will go and find them. And I posted something recently on LinkedIn about the response that I got from the officials at USAID. who just looked at me and said, I know who you are, Geoff. You're one of those hemp people. And this isn't a problem for us. You need to take it to the mission. Well, for most people, the mission is the local embassy. Well, I said to the official, I said, what does the mission have to do with it? She said, well, maybe they'll help you, but I don't have time for it. And that then sent me on a quest because, I thought USDA could help us. I found out that USDA FAS has someone that deals with advancing ingredients. We started this process in November with them. They came back and said it's quite a lengthy process. Send us more information. I sent them the same nutritional profile that I gave out at our meetings in Rwanda. They were shocked. They said we had not a clue.
They had no idea. Yeah.
Well, and that's USDA FAS, Foreign Agricultural Services. And 3 weeks later, I was sent an email from USDA Agricultural Research Services asking me to look at a video that they were going to release recently, which was all about the research that they've undertaken on the nutritional benefits of hemp seed, hemp grain.
There you go.
I sent that to ARS. I sent that video from ARS over to FAS, and I said, have you seen this? And they responded by saying, no, we have not. And it's a shame because they're only one floor apart from us. and that is both a frustration, but also clearly demonstrates the need for an all-of government, if at least an all-of agency USDA approach.
Yeah.
I think given the experience that we've had with Stephen Baden, the relationship that we've developed with him over the years, and I'm quite comfortable in that Stephen at the time was really interested in learning more. Obviously, Senator McConnell was a big influence on the legislation. He wanted to go and see what was happening in Kentucky, and went to visit our members, Hempwood and Victory Hemp. So that legwork has already been done by somebody who's going to be the number 2 person at USDA.
That's awesome.
So assuming that his nomination is confirmed, we will have a friend, at least NHA will have a friend in USDA.
Cool. All right. So you mentioned old Mitch McConnell.
Industrial hemp.
Yeah.
And he's no longer in that leadership position, but there's a sort of possibly a hemp-friendly guy there now too, right? Can you talk about South Dakota?
Yeah, so Senator Thune has now become the majority leader in the Senate, and he's from South Dakota. And I have worked with him through some of my private sector initiatives, and one of my former colleagues on the replant side of our business has a personal relationship with him. And now that he is the majority leader, that was one of the very first outreaches that I undertook, to get in with his staff to kind of talk to them about where we are and what we're doing, and was able to be a little more efficient, and provide them with solid information as to where we are and where we're going. I don't know, Eric, if you or your listeners have seen. I reposted it on LinkedIn, but the Congressional Research Service did an update in January of the hemp status, and it was one of the reports that we asked be updated. It was called In Focus, and I think it was January the 10th that it was released.
Okay.
But it really kind of did a quick update of here's where we are,
Cool.
and it really was written in such a way that it's a Farm Bill primer. Everybody's new at this game again, and since we don't know the status of the Farm Bill, we at NHA have been successful in having language put into both the House and the Senate versions. The question is, will that stay there? What will happen with that now that the Republicans, the GOP, are now in charge of the Senate? They didn't want to pass the Democratic version of the Farm Bill. So now, are they going to start all over? Does that give us an opportunity to tweak it because obviously we have concerns about the Miller Amendment and its unforeseen consequences on the House side. So, is this an opportunity for us? I believe so. So I met with Thune's team last week and certainly went over the issues, and they are very supportive.
Okay. I mean, South Dakota is the biggest producer of industrial hemp at this point, or has been the past couple of years with Ken Meyer and the crew up there. Does Thune know about Ken Meyer?
That I didn't specifically raise, but certainly, I presented them with the list of all of their fiber and grain permit holders, and obviously Ken's group would be on that.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so a lot going on. Can you sort of linger a bit on some of the other maybe bright spots that you see coming up in the space?
Yeah, I also have great hope should Bobby Kennedy be installed as the Secretary of HHS, because I've worked on educating him on industrial hemp.
Okay.
And certainly because of what I've read, what I understand of his interest in advancing good nutrition. Obviously, hemp can play a major role. But, we have this incredible barrier, which is the FDA looking at industrial hemp as being, a brand new commodity. And that as a brand new commodity, anything and everything that is being produced from it has to be researched, verified before it can become approved. And that's a lengthy process. As you know, our sister organization, the Hemp Feed Coalition, has advanced through AFCO, which is an organization that was in place but may no longer be in place.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Oh, my goodness.
And that we will be dealing directly with USDA CVM on this. And so that process was years in the making. And, there are 65 to maybe 100 different categories of animals, species that
we would big ruminants, little ruminants, all kinds of chickens.
Exactly.
Yeah. Four kinds of guinea pigs, all sorts of stuff.
Right. And although those markets are substantial, I think that Andrew Bish provided me with some documents to take to Washington on the economic impact of adopting and approving hemp for animal feed. The egg laying hen component alone could result in a need for hundreds of thousands of acres. And then, you see what's happening. And this is one of my fears, is that, I am seeing what happened with the cannabinoid floral side of our industry unfolding on the fiber, on the grain side and the feed side. Whereas states are now, Montana being the first and others are quickly following, changing their own definition of animal feed and including industrial hemp. So there's going to be this mixed hodgepodge approach to animal feed. We in Pennsylvania, very happy with what's happening there. They have certainly recognized the opportunity to help stand up the hemp grain industry by opening the door. But I'm concerned about, that is only establishing an in-state solution, an in-state opportunity. And although substantial, both from a farming perspective and a feed perspective, what are the implications with, animals that are fed product here in Pennsylvania and then maybe shipped or sold or end product sold into another state? That may become a problem, and we need to avoid that.
A lot of interesting things headed our way. You mentioned earlier that NHA has a new board and that you had a survey recently. So maybe we talk about those things. Let's talk about the survey and maybe tell me some of the takeaways from that.
Well, I'll go back. Last year at our annual general meeting, we increased the size of the board, and we created 2 positions for industry representatives, one that was on the processing side and one that was more on the end use construction side. So Morgan Elliott joined us on the grow and industry processing side.
Okay. Yeah.
Cameron McIntosh joined us on the construction side.
Okay.
And I think it was more so that we could start to address the issue of what are the specific interests of the end users and work with the industry to create those standards and opportunities and move those segments forward. From there, we've decided to do an internal review of who we are, what we do. There'll be some news coming out on that shortly, but it was also one of the things in that process was conducting a survey with the industry, not just our members, but the entire industry, getting their input on issues that we know are out there. We know that we have been leading on, but we just needed to get direction from people in the industry who are out, doing the work. And we've had a very good response, all very positive, really focused on, where we go from here.
Is that survey still open?
It is.
Okay, so I'll put a link to it on this show page, get people there.
Yeah, and I think we will close it at the end of the month. But certainly I've already used preliminary results in my discussions in Washington.
Oh, great. Excellent. All right. Well, it sounds like we're off to another fun year in the hemp space. Yeah?
I think so.
Yeah, good. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we wrap it up?
No, I'd encourage people to look at NHA, the work that we do. And if you certainly are supportive of our work and want to see us advance, we're here to work with the industry as much as we can. That's our sole focus. And certainly membership helps us do so.
All right. We'll put links up to all your stuff on the show page too, so people can click. All right. Well, Geoff Whaling, again, it's great to talk to you. And I wish you great success in this year and health and prosperity too.
That's great. Thanks very much.
All right, there you go. That's the show for today. Thank you for listening. Now I got to clean up and get out of here. Seriously, I got to go. I know you're busy, and I really appreciate that you spent some time with me here. Thanks to Geoff Whaling for also spending time with us here. I hope you all learned something from Geoff. I always do when I talk to him. If you have comments, questions, concerns, whatever, send me an email. Send it to podcast@lancasterfarming.com. My name is Eric Herlock. I am the senior digital editor here at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. Check us out online at lancasterfarming.com. All right. Hey, just if you want to be a sponsor for our show, please also reach out to me because we are now accepting new sponsors and we've got some cool packages for you. All right. That's it. Until next time, I'll see you in the newspaper.
Industrial hemp.
This episode of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2025 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written, recorded, edited, and produced by Eric Herlock with production help from Sophia Cursius. The music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tinbird Shiner.